Okay, so I just had a bit of an epiphany regarding Buddhism and the idea of consciousness. So the idea is, the question is, what happens to consciousness after death, and or the mind, and the idea largely figures in Buddhism is that it's reborn in some kind of a new form, in some new body, and as I stated earlier today, kind of like that usually manifests in four forms. And the four ways to be born are generally from a womb, from an egg, from some mysterious substance, or spontaneously. Now, I mean, this is just a lot of really technical stuff, but to get to the point, the mind will always continue into the new life. The consciousness, essentially, the string of being that you can relate yourself. Essentially, it's the ability to be aware of existence and have free will continually with regards to time. Now, I know this is getting very mathy, but what I just said is entirely true. I will probably put down somewhere. But being is yeah, it's the existence of a thing, a form, I suppose, that continues, is able to access its surrounding environment with awareness of the senses, and have free will, kind of the free thought of its own, with the mind, and essentially the complicated process that is free will. Because if you think about it, free will requires essentially freedom of thought, and freedom of thought, if you don't have any sensory input, then you have a tabula rasa, as they say in classical Indian scriptures. That means you have a clear mind. You have absolutely nothing to think from. You have no baseline thinking. But if that's all you have, then you're basically just sitting there, kind of like a sea sponge, just absorbing, soaking up the information, and just you live and you eat something and you die. But what really makes the human experience unique is that you are able to use that and kind of record that down as a memory. And this string of memories form the consciousness, and these memories, just kind of a seeming record of the past, can be altered by decisions that are made based on previous memories. And so this is a bit of a complicated process, but one important thing to realize is that it involves the mind. And here's the thing. The mind, in modern science, this is why I think that Buddhism is extremely fascinating, because they were able to predict this thousands of years before modern science ever got here. But we were able to understand some functions of the mind. We know that memory is afflicted by Alzheimer's disease, which has a direct impact on the brain. So we understand to an extent the functions of the brain and the functions of, in its relation to the mind, as in what we can do with our mind. Now, we can't go and say, like implant somebody's consciousness into somebody else yet, because we really don't have the idea of that, or kind of more metaphysical transformations. But we do have an idea of some functions of the brain. But here's the problem. As soon as you pass on, as soon as you die, you don't have the decision-making cortex. You don't have the decision-making. I don't know that much about neurology, but you don't have the physical means to decision-making anymore, or kind of like this thought-making almost. Your own free thought, and it really depends on your access to those physical resources to be able to have free thought. And as soon as that's gone, that means that there isn't a way for the consciousness to carry on. But because of the inevitable nature of karma according to Buddhism, there must be a way for consciousness to carry on. And so here's the question. How can it carry on if this existence is only based on the body? The existence is null. There's no soul per se. There's no kind of like opposition to the concepts of Hinduism. That there's no inherent being, an atta. I think the idea is anatta, which is no atta, yourself, is the being that's being reborn. And so how can this happen? Well, I found this video recently, and I think it illustrates the concept with regard to the various schools of Buddhism, but I think that's not the only aspect of this. I think there's some other questions that still need to be explored. So, the man in the video, I forgot his name, he's a Buddhist monk, and he basically explained it in the Mahayana school of Buddhism, that theory is that, you can link a consciousness essentially to the base senses, but there's also essentially kind of like this whole sophisticated complex of the mind and of the different mental functions that occur can be linked to some other organ, which is true. That's the brain, for the most part, that we know of so far. However, the theory in Mahayana is that beyond this brain consciousness, beyond this resource, there is also a larger, greater, almost kind of like a container. Once in citation, you have like a container. I'm pretty sure this also applies to computer science. You have like kind of like a function that you're running the program, and the program itself, and like the thing that's basically kind of running the program, and that is within the computer software, and the computer software is like running within something else. I don't know that much about computer science either, but I can say that I know this concept applies to multiple fields, and so it's almost like a container, and this container holds the karmic balances and imbalances, essentially the complicated karmic matrix of the individual's karma, of their life, past lives, future lives, and residual change. And it's always, it's this ever-changing basin, like a container for the mental consciousness. So here's the problem with that, though. If this container, if this karmic consciousness were the only consciousness to survive, then essentially the I, as we know it, not even memories, but like just the essential story of perception, of being, of thought, and that essence that makes you yourself, that would not continue. And I'm sorry, the pacing is getting a little bit weird. I just had to close the doors because there was some miscellaneous noises occurring outside. Anyway, as I was saying, that would completely defeat the purpose of rebirth. Rebirth could not exist without some kind of a mental consciousness to continue something, a little bit more firm, a little bit more material than just a karma, to be born, and so to be reborn. And so I was still confused by this, and I just, at the end of the video, I just accepted the idea. I realized, okay, I might just have to accept the idea that, a karma consciousness is something beyond human comprehension, and it allows the mental consciousness to travel to rebirth in a way that we can't even begin to comprehend. But then I saw this comment immediately beneath the video. It was a very cliche, kind of philosophical, metaphysical question of the waves in the ocean, which is the idea of, once a wave, you see a wave and it crashes against the shore, and once the wave crashes and it, and it kind of resides, back into the ocean, it's still part of the same ocean. And I thought, well, yeah, of course, but how does this relate to individual consciousness? Okay, I apologize. I just had to take a short break to complete an assignment that I was working on earlier. Anyway, what I believe I was saying before, yes, apologies, I can't really go back and listen to what I was saying, so I might be a little bit, disjointed, but if I recall correctly, I was saying that I was just I was essentially, how do I put this, I can't think of the word. Yeah, discussing. I was discussing the paradox of Mahayana Buddhism, and this comment that I saw underneath the video. All right, yeah, sorry about that. So I remember that this comment said, well, what happens to a wave after the wave is gone? Is it still a wave? I think that what I've realized, I've kind of had a bit of an epiphany. I've had a bit of a realization. So my realization is that, this isn't the exact, I don't think this is exactly the best question to ask, but this really got me thinking. And so I thought that, we think about each wave as a platonic form of its own. Whatever you say about platonic forms, I think they're extremely useful to any metaphysics, because they're like a foundational concept, and even if you're arguing against them, you're still using that concept. So I think that you can say that all of these waves they conform to the idea, to the form of a wave that we can imagine, and each wave on its own is an individual, almost copy of that form, but nonetheless an individual wave. But we perceive each of those to be a thing, parentheses thing, of its own. And as soon as, the illusion breaks, kind of the wave breaks against the, crashes against the shore, or slowly kind of dissipates back into the ocean, it's very hard to say, that's a wave anymore. Well, okay, all right, so here's a wave. Now, okay, keep watching, like, the footage, or kind of like, if you go down to the beach and show, here's a wave, and you see it, and after, like, 5 seconds, maybe it kind of dissipates and recedes back into the ocean. Then, if you keep standing there and kind of, 2 hours later, I asked you, okay, all right, now, where's that wave? Where's that wave now? It could be possible that just by random chance it all coincided in the form of some other wave. regenerated into another wave. Um, yes, maybe with some significant, pieces of the wave off in different areas and different patches. But then you get into the whole ship of thesis debate about, if 40% of this wave chunk is gone, then how can you say that this is the wave? Because you can't really negate this, and next thing you know, maybe half of the wave is here and half of the wave is here. So, can you really cling to the contents of that wave like they're their own thing? And this brings us to our conclusion, which is that if you think of the human mind as a wave in the ocean, I know it's going to sound really cliche and cheesy, but it's true. In the ocean of karmic consciousness, then this wave, this mind, as soon as it dissipates and essentially the tide, the current, almost kind of like a body for the mind, dissipates, the mind has nothing left to sustain itself with, because I think we don't realize, in a lot of these spiritual traditions, how critical, and if you're really going to go deep into this, the brain itself is to the consciousness of the mind. And if the brain is able to carry out all these tasks like memory, consciousness, identification of the ego, you can even screw with that. You can even take ayahuasca or something like that, and like you don't ego dissolution, you don't have a sense of consciousness anymore. And so we have a sense of like these are things that you can change with the brain, but if the brain is gone, that means that there's no container for the mind anymore. That means that there's no continuity for the mind. And so essentially, if you frame it in terms of this is where you were over the course of your life, a wave is still one thing. And so I think that there are really multiple ways to approach this problem, but if you try to envision all the possible reformations of that wave due to random theory, chaos theory, they are by the laws of nature, they will eventually expand into different patterns so complicated. Maybe these waves will be scattered, by possibly, like a year. These waves can be scattered around beaches all around the world. This one wave that was you. And so how can you say that? How can you know that? But here's the thing. Here's the problem. We view consciousness as a solitary form. And if it is a solitary form, then this can't happen. Now, the only other aspect, the identity of this wave that conforms to the theory of a solitary, living, breathing, conscious thing, so anything that's not the container, anything that's not the currents that are pushing the wave, pretty much the only other variable that remains constant is that location of the wave, because the wave could dissipate and completely reappear in another area of the beach. Like 100% of the wave could reappear somehow by the laws of physics. I'm sure that given enough time in the universe, it could be possible that every single atom of one wave would make it over to another part of the beach and reappear as another wave. But we have to completely abandon any concept of that idea, because it's too much. Apologies. It's too much to comprehend. With what if the wave divides into like billions of different parts all around the world? How can you say where's the wave now? But here's the other thing that remains constant: the location. So if you have like a small kind of camera shot on like the area where the wave is, hey, say another wave reappears in that area to a certain extent, you could say that consciousness, maybe instead of thinking of a consciousness as a thing, you could think of it as, well, maybe a little pocket of a map or a little part of a large terrain. almost, and that, if your consciousness is separated enough from others, it could be possible that, then why, you could say, like, well, why isn't it the case that, like, two people have one consciousness? Well, because inevitably, people have different bodies, and these bodies are going to react in different ways. But, people have said, and I know this has gotten to a lot of controversy, that that was just 2022, which is the current date of which this recording was made. Anyway, it is getting really long, so I should probably finish sometime soon. But the point is that, this has gotten to a lot of controversy lately, but, sincerely there is a percentage of the population who have, DID, dissociative identity disorder, which means that you have multiple consciousnesses essentially inside one brain. And I think it could be possible that this is just a manifestation of completely different sets of thought, completely different sets of memories and personalities and framing of the universe through one consciousness. But if it's true, then it could be possible that consciousnesses are like these areas, and if a wave relapses in this area, the consciousness is reborn again to an extent for some time, maybe. And, maybe the percentage of the wave in this area, say the wave, maybe there's just a little tiny kind of relapse of the wave. Maybe you're reborn as like an amoeba with like a little tiny relapse of consciousness, just barely to the extent of an amoeba. Maybe if there's a whole other wave, exactly smack dab in the middle, right where it was. Maybe you're another human. But the point is that the only way to avoid this scenario is if these patches, these pockets were infinitesimally small, which would be to say that, this wave only exists, it's a weird concept, but this wave only exists for as long as it covers this patch. And as soon as, another wave covers this patch, the consciousness is reborn. But these waves are things that it's almost like a medium between bodies of the world, the physical material world, and the realm of mental consciousness, and karmic consciousness, even outside of that. But something that could possibly transcend and go between these two areas, essentially, I don't want to say worlds, but realms of existence, could be these waves, per se. Because think about it. If your consciousness is just one dot on the huge expanse of the ocean, and the ocean is the basin of karmic influences, then these waves could be the consciousnesses that are not necessarily the people, me, myself, I, like who I am, per se, but the thing that essentially triggers that solitary, that mono consciousness, that one-dimensional, like zero-dimensional point, on or off, to exist. So to continue and conclude this metaphor, and I know, yes, I said I was concluding like less than halfway through the video, but still, to conclude the final part of this, if all of a sudden, miraculously, somehow, all of the water was sucked from the ocean by some means of force we can't even comprehend, if that were to suddenly remove all the water by some strange extension of natural force, then this point of reality would never be triggered again, which could mean that our consciousness, per se, would live on forever, but our connection to our consciousness would, or our, it's like, what even is that? What is our, anymore, but our connection to our consciousness, could only, would no longer exist. And so I think that it could be possible that this can be, reborn in and out in certain ways, but that these waves are not necessarily consciousness, per se, as much as they are conduits, or carriers of the signal that, it's like, I'm going to go into coding slang now, but it's like, some kind of, that I don't really understand it, but carries of this signal that, yes, to the detector And, you could say that's all that consciousness is. It's like a detector saying, yes or no. If yes, then, it's, you are there. But here's the thing, if that means that consciousness does not exactly, necessarily operate according to whether a physical body is there or not, that means that at some point in your life your consciousness could just die and you wouldn't. But here's the thing, if there's nobody to operate your body, then essentially you would just die right there on the spot, because it could, the brain has a symbiotic relationship with this mind that's using it, and if the mind is no longer there, then, well, that's it. But it could mean, theoretically, that a consciousness could exist outside of the brain, or outside of a physical body, for any period of time. Oh my god, I was trying to see faces outside. I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, the point is that the physicality and the transcendence of consciousness at this point can only be dependent on these conduits, and that if, say, a wave, as we would think of it as, a wave as that conduit, exists in a certain location or over a certain location, then yes, it's that same wave. And here's the thing, this really comes down to, the water is all one material thing. It's all one, you could say that, it's the atoms of the wave, and you could say that, if you could track each individual atom of the wave and source down, yes, that's where the material is. But if it's so dissipated across the course of the Earth, a bunch of seemingly random atoms scattered in positions all throughout the Earth, so far away from each other, doesn't have any significance anymore. There's no significance as a greater whole. And so it could be said that, it's really about the location. It's really about, if there is a conduit passing through this one point at this particular time, then this could function as a means of consciousness. So imagine, in final conclusion, ultimate conclusion, if you can imagine a map of the world and a bunch of random points on it, essentially, in the water, kind of like, at random points, say, imagine like a map of the ocean and a bunch of random points in the water. Essentially, each of our consciousnesses are these points, and we are really only there, we really only exist if there is a wave there. If there's a wave there, then there's something there, then there's a house on the land, then the land is significant, then the thing exists. But if there's no thing there, then all it is a point, and the waves are somewhere else, which could be, and it could be very well be the case that there are consciousnesses between people that exist in spaces where people don't exist, but because there are no point consciousnesses to receive them, then, I know this sounds crazy at this point, but I'm just going to go for it. If there are no point consciousnesses to receive them, then that means that they have absolutely no meaning, and that they are just spaces of influence. And it's really when these spaces of influence overlap with human existence that they create these consciousnesses. So, it could be possible that it takes an extremely long time to be reborn, but it's really up to this sea, to this ocean of the ultimate consciousness, like a candle lighter to light the candles. If the candle lighter was every flame of the world somehow combined. I know the metaphor doesn't really hold up anymore, but I hope you get the point. Anyway, as a message to future Alexander, please try to record this to paper, or put pen to paper. Please try and get this down at some point, because this is an extremely valuable epiphany that I've had, and everything that I've learned from this video, I want the world to know. Alright, I'm sorry, that's a really cheesy ending, but still, please just get it down. Thank you.